I said at the beginning of my YouTube journey that I was not going to be able to be the one niche guy. I enjoy woodworking, I enjoy timber framing, lots of other things, but I also have taken on, over the last couple of years, leatherworking. Now, whether we're talking about leatherworking for your personal use, things like belts or wallets, it really is a wonderful craft to add to your tool belt, if you will, in order to accomplish these things for yourself, for your kids, for your friends, and so forth. But also within your woodworking shop, it's helpful to have leatherworking skill. Now, whether we're talking about making yourself an apron, or we're talking about something like behind me, where you can make these holders for your hand planes and mallets and other tools, or even when it comes to woodworking itself and combining leather with wood, you can do a lot of wonderful things, using leather for drawer pulls, using leather as hinges, or even going all out with campaign furniture and really combining a lot of leather with a lot of wood. You can do so much if you just have a little bit of application of even some of your other skills, some of your other tools, and I want to talk about that in this video, and so here we go. So one of the things that I want to point out to you is some of the crossover tools that you probably already have and that you can transfer from woodworking into leatherworking. For instance, you might have some kind of chisel, a paring chisel or otherwise, that you could use to cut corners on projects or to even make cuts on certain leather pieces. You probably have a set of wing dividers that you would want to use in order to make nice straight lines along the leather project itself. No doubt you have a nice sharp utility knife that you can use to cut leather. Something like an awl is really useful because you might want to take your square or your ruler and to make a straight line on the project, and that brings out the square itself. Having nice square leather, it's the same as needing pieces of wood that are square. You want your leather to be square, and so you can have a nice square in order to bring that about. Most of you probably have where you can make a mallet. Now, this one is chewed up, but it is useful in order to hit your stitching irons and that sort of a thing. But then you also might want to use a crossover tool that you might not have immediately thought of, something like a plane. Now, a plane can actually, on the flesh side of the leather, you can do a good job at cleaning up some of the edges, and so that might be useful there. And then when it comes down to your burnishing on the edges, some of you who are good at turning, you could easily turn something like that to bring about the burnishing that you want on your edges, a very simple tool. And then last but not least, some sandpaper. Yes, you sandpaper the edges of your project. So if you have a wallet that you're working on and you glue that together and then you stitch that together, you would want to actually sand with different grits on the edge of that leather. As though you weren't sick of sanding in woodcraft, you do bring sanding over to leathercraft, and that really gives you some nice edges. Now, as you get into leatherworking, you're going to find that you're going to need more than your crossover tools. And I have a few tools in front of me that have helped me to really get into the craft, and some that would help you as well. Now, when we're thinking about leatherwork, we use a skiver in order to thin out the leather. Now, they have ones that are electric and do a really wonderful job, but a small skiver like this is for skiving by hand. And what skiving is really thinning out the leather in order to fold it over or to just make it thinner for your projects. It's a bit like a jointer or a planer, and it helps to bring down the material. That's what this small tool does here. Now, this tool here is an edge beveler, and this would function a bit like a router with a chamfering bit or a roundover bit in it. And there again, that helps to bring the edge down and to make it nice and rounded over on the edge of the piece of leather. You also have this tool here that I've already mentioned, but this helps to burnish the edges and to make those nice and shiny and uniform. And then you have here some punches. Now, you do need punches at various times in leather. You can punch holes in order to set rivets or to put grommets in. I have another tool here that can be used for punching various small holes, and that's really nice too because it has 6 or 7 different sizes that you can use on your material. But then when it comes to stitching, it is very important that you figure out exactly what you want to do with stitching before you ever get into leatherworking. But I would totally recommend investing in some small stitching chisels. Now these chisels are really pretty nice. They're made by Craft. I am not sponsored or anything, but these tools are by Craft, as well as the Skyver and the Edge Beveler. But these are really nice in order to get your holes for your stitching. So this is something that you do first. You use your stitching chisels, pound those in, make your lines, and then you come back with your needle and thread in order to make your nice stitches in your wallet or your belt or whatever you're making. Now with that, you're going to need a couple of needles. Now needles are very important because you're going to attach your thread to them, and then you're going to stitch right down the line that you make with your stitching chisel. But then there is a final thing that you are going to need, and it's probably something that you can make. And this is what's called a stitching pony. Now I made this out of some scrap oak, some scrap walnut, and a bolt and a wing nut. And so it's a very simple contraption. As you can see, it did not take me much to make. I did not put an incredible amount into it, but you put your project right between there, and it essentially functions like your vise, right? It functions like a clamp. You put your project in there, you sit on this part of it, and then you can stitch right in front of you. So that's a really easy way to get yourself going. You can use plywood for that project, just some scrap that you have laying around, and that'll really get you going when it comes to some of the tools that you'll need in order to jump into this craft. Now, when we start talking about leather, it's in a very important conversation because we're talking about two main kinds of leather. Now, I'm not talking about the tanneries that the leather comes from as much as I am the leather itself and the kind of tanning process the leather has gone through. The more well-known is probably going to be what we call veg tan, and it's kind of got this very light color. As you see in different stores, it'll always be a kind of light color. But the good thing about veg tan is that it takes dye extremely well. It burnishes really well on the corners, and really veg tan is an absolute delight to work with. If you're interested in getting into any kind of leather tooling, then you're going to want to be using this kind of leather, which again is veg tan. And again, I really have come to enjoy using this sort of leather, whether we are talking thinner stock for wallets, but also thicker stock for something like belts and tooling belts. It really has become something I enjoy. And so veg tan is what you're going to want to use for that. Now, something like this comes out of a really nice tannery out in Chicago, and it is a beautiful leather. Some of this just needs to get the horsehair brushed to it in order to clean it up. But this is some really nice stuff, and it's called chrome tan leather. And for those of you who know, you can actually see the company, the tannery that I'm talking about. No, I am not sponsored, although that would be very nice. But chrome tan leather is excellent for wallets and for other products that you're going to kind of have on your person. It does also work well, depending on how thick it is. It works well for belts and that sort of a thing. But I really enjoy working with chrome tan leather for wallets, for binders, or some kind of journal. Things like that, chrome tan works extremely well for. All right, so don't at me in the comments, but when I think of these two different kinds of leather, I think of veg tan as a little bit more cowboy and chrome tan as a little bit more city boy. But you have other things that you should be aware of when we're talking about the leather, and that is that you have the grain side, which would be the top, and then you have the flesh side, which would be the underneath part. So you've got the sort of flesh, the grain side, which is kind of like the face of your project, if you will, and then you have the flesh side, which nobody is really ever going to see. Now, I do want to issue you a little bit of a warning when it comes to leather. All leather is not created equal. For instance, if you are going to jump into a leather shop and buy some scraps, or you're going to buy some on the internet, you need to make sure that you're not buying bonded leather, or that you make sure that you're not buying anything that is called like top grain leather or genuine leather. All of that sounds really fancy, but you don't want to buy anything like that. If it says genuine leather, you really ought to stay away from that if you're trying to get into the leather craft. So really what you're wanting when you're purchasing leather is what is called full grain leather. If it says it is full grain leather, then it's going to be a delight to work with. It'll be a little bit more expensive, but it will be more worth it for sure. Okay, now when we're thinking about supplies that you're going to need, just like with woodworking, you need various supplies in order to pull off your projects, whether we're talking about screws or nails or glue, all of those kinds of things. It applies for the same with leatherwork. Now, when you're using dye, it's important to have some good dye. I prefer Fiebing's Pro dyes, and this is a very good dye that again is not that expensive for dyeing your veg tan leather. You have another product here that's very well known in the leatherworking community called Tokonol, and this helps you to get those really nice burnished edges. Simple glue, I would recommend absolutely getting some kind of leather specific glue. You could also use some kind of contact cement, which would also be good for gluing your projects together before you get to this part, which is the stitching, the thread. And there are specific leather working threads like this one and like this one. This company here is made right in Maine, so I really enjoy supporting them as I'm able. It's a very nice wax corded thread. And so you're gonna have to invest in some things like this, but again, the lift is not all that much in order to get into this. These are all very small, kind of lower level things other than this larger spool. But the investment is fairly minimal to get yourself going, gluing things, dyeing things, and then ultimately stitching them together. Now, when it comes to some of the skills and the crossover skills between woodworking and leatherworking, you already have so much of that. Now, you already understand mallets. You understand how to hit a chisel. You understand how to hold a chisel plumb, for instance. If we start talking about using a square or using rulers, you understand how to have a piece of square wood, so you know how to have a piece of square leather. Those things are not going to be complicated for you. It's going to be very simple. And really, when it comes to leathercraft, I think that one thing that you would end up enjoying is you would enjoy the fact that you can make a project from front to back so much quicker in leatherworking than you can in woodworking. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that leather and wood just go together. And I think that if you give leatherworking a little bit of a shot, you'll find that it's not only enjoyable, but it's something that you can combine with your projects in order to bring out even more beauty in your woodworking and really highlight more of your craftsmanship. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop them below. But hey, until next time, God bless you, and we'll see you then.